for the last in a series of webinars on the UC personal insight questions. And it's been a real pleasure. It's been a great experience to, really just go back and think, how are we coaching our students, looking back at all the work, so much work. Admissions it requires a lot. So I think to go back and look at all the essays from years back and see the fruits of the labor and enjoy the fruits of the labor, that's been really, really nice. And being in conversation with the counselors, of course, we're in conversation all the time throughout the year and in very close conversation during admissions season. We meet as a group as well once a month. But we don't, we haven't really drilled down in this way. So that's been really, that's been really fun. And it's been really nice for me to be able to introduce our team to people. So, and today I'll be talking with Stacy Johnson. She'll be coming in a little bit for UC Personal Question 8. I do want to say that it's been really fun talking with students this week. And what's interesting is that usually in the summer, we don't talk to our students as much because they're away at their programs. So we might go like 4 weeks without talking to a student, and then, or 6 weeks sometimes, and come back and hear all about the program and what they've learned and what they've explored and how they've grown, and they learn to do laundry. It's always fun at the end of the summer. But so this summer, because of the accommodations we've had to make, we're having all of these like little epiphanies and little growth spurts as we go along. So I've been really enjoying that too, meeting with students more regularly and tracking their progress. And, it's very interesting, not going to these fancy summer programs and doing things like seriously closer to home, obviously in terms of being at home, but doing things that maybe feel more natural to them, I think has built a lot of their confidence. They've really grown. It's been really lovely to meet up with students this summer. And so yeah, we've got students reading the Joy Luck Club. We've got students reading The God of Small Things. So we've got them working on their critical reading, exposing themselves to great literature. We just talked with a student who's doing the online summer program at Barnard on activism, and totally jazzed, super excited. It was really fun to talk with her about that program. We've been meeting with students on their time management. We had a gorgeous weekly schedule displayed to us. It's a student I work with Helen, and every day laid out, the hours that he does things, really, really lovely. So that was very exciting to see. Having the students at home during the summer is also just allowing us to work with them on their life skills. And it's really turning out well. We have all of our students talking about the teaching they're doing. It's so animated as they explain how they're organizing things, how they're rewarding students, the kinds of curricula they're coming up with. So it's a hard time, I know, but if we stay busy and we're doing good things, we will have made the best use of our time. We're going to have the best stories for our children and grandchildren. And I just feel really full of pride for all of the great work that they're doing. We also have another student whose computer science project was recognized by Eben Upton, the founder of the Raspberry Pi. And he's got a project on the Coolest Projects website. And he's a rising junior, that's the kind of recognition that top engineering schools will be looking for. I mean, he's got a bunch of other things going on that are also amazing. We started working with him just as high school started and started putting in place, how do you define your interests? How do you activate your interests? How do you go about, making things work, looking for opportunities and building in, again, a lot of the life skills and soft skills that are necessary for going after these kinds of opportunities. So if you learn that in ninth grade, as opposed to 11th grade, and you're shooting for a top 10, top 20, top 30 school, which I know a lot of people who hang around Blue Stars, that's the aspiration. This is a really great model. So I just wanted to share some news with you guys. All right, I have more news. I have a lot of news. This is me. You all know me, so I won't get into it too much, but it really just is a thrill to have been able to help so many people and gain so much from the people we work with. My wonderful team, and you will have the honor of listening to Helen, Laura, and Stacy as they share their thoughts on the Common Application essay in a few weeks. I'm really excited for that. Here's the schedule. Let's go forward. Here are our topics. And let's get started. So, the university plans are all over the place, depending on, where you are in the country, what kinds of facilities you have. So just sharing a few cases with you guys. So here we have UC Berkeley. They're just going online in the fall. Classes are going to begin on August 26th. They'll be taught virtually. Okay, there is an opportunity for approved in-person instruction later in the term. They're just going to see how it goes. All right, they will be prioritizing courses that require labs or studios, courses where you really benefit from hands-on instruction. And don't exactly know what's going on here, but other schools, the other UC schools, are making similar changes, so stay tuned for that. Cornell, for example, New York, clear across the country, right? They've flattened their curve. They're doing a hybrid approach. In fact, our student intern, who's been so wonderful, such a great addition to the team this summer, she'll be quarantining herself, and then school starts on the 2nd of September, and they'll be finishing up remotely after Thanksgiving, that's the general pattern around the country. Note that there will be student commitments. That's going to pretty much be campus, across the country. Campuses will be requiring that sort of student commitment, which I think is just a very interesting addition to just the understanding of what it means to go to college. I've come across a new database through Davidson College that is sort of tracking the ways in which universities and campuses are innovating in light of the pandemic. So I thought you might find that interesting. I put it in the resources for you. Hi, oh my. I don't know what else to say right now about the SAT, because all they're saying, and I know I got a question on this last week, that's why I'm putting this in, and I did as much as I could researching, but I think they're planning on holding it, and it's going to depend on the test center. So if you or your child has already signed up for an SAT, you just have to sort of stay in touch with the test center to see what is going on. And if they don't hold the SAT in August, or if in California students are unable to take it, we'll talk then. We'll just talk then. I can't predict the future, but there will be accommodations. There will definitely be accommodations. So this is interesting. University of Michigan has extended the early admission deadline to November 15th. Usually it's November 1st. So students have 2 more weeks. They are releasing their decisions quite a bit later, end of January. So usually it's by the middle of December. So that's a little different. And you can see here my parenthetical, admissions community frustrated. You know, I think people are waiting for word from universities to sort of tell juniors, like, don't even bother, forget the SAT, you know. I don't know if they're going to do that. I have no idea. But if you all are feeling frustrated and impatient, all I can say is that the admissions community is too, like the admissions guidance counselors, college counselors, independent counselors. It's really, everyone is really frustrated with the College Board. So, and the ACT. But hopefully things will start to resolve themselves. Let us see. I'll keep track for you guys in newsletters. Okay, impact on rising freshmen, sophomores, juniors. Really, it's getting used to preparing for top college admissions during a time of shifting standards and expectations with no or few concrete rules. I know I mentioned this last week, but repetition of the message, I think, is important during times, you know, changing times. We tend to default on what we already know. So I just want to keep prompting people to think in fresh ways. And we're always here to help you do that. Oh, I put something in here that, well, you'll understand what I mean by this positive obsession. But, you know, think through things that you really love and then love them by learning about it, by improving it, by sharing whatever it is with others. Activate, explore, activate, explore. That's really my suggestion to younger students. Just keep exploring and activating. So I recently read an article on whether algorithms, or the fact that there's lots of discussion about algorithms playing a larger role in admissions. I've linked you to that article. I'll give it to you in resources in an email. And so just here are a few of the things that are being bandied about in terms of what might pop up in the next few years. Perhaps an application might have some sort of cognitive game for students to play. So they're talking about gamifying to detect micro behaviors, micro cognition. They're thinking about tracking student activities on the university website to see what students are looking at. So in our case, working with Blue Stars, when we do school selection with students, as you know from the webinar I did on school selection, and we have a recording on that as well, we have students really pay attention to academic departments, like really looking into the nitty-gritty of the academics. So besides the fact that this is possibly a privacy issue, and they could, maybe it might not even be legal to do this, who knows? If they do it, I think our students would fare really well because they're looking at very substantial things. So anyway, possibly there'll be more admissions videos, like video interviews, things like that. And there's also talk about something actually that's quite different, an optimization process that builds cohorts of students instead of selecting students one at a time. So let's say, you know, a campus might want a certain amount of first generation college students on their campus, and they need a certain amount of let's say athletes or something like that. So they might create algorithms so that they get the class they want. And generally that is how admissions works at elite universities. And that's why, you know, so many good students are rejected and don't understand why. It's not personal. They're not just looking at each individual and saying yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. They're looking at, you know, the mixture of students in that year's cohort. So anyway, fun times. shifting times. And I just thought I'd pass some of that along to you. Wisdom from Raymond Chandler. You know, I talked a little bit about revision last week. I think it was last week. You know, your drafts, they're little precious eggs for a while until they've been revised a few times. So, you know, think about who you're going to give that precious egg to. But in the meantime, when you're thinking about going through the process of drafting and revising, I thought this was just really wonderful. Throw up into your typewriter every morning, clean up every noon. So for us, we can obviously substitute the computer, but I talk about free writing with our students like that. I do tell them to vomit, metaphorically, you know, into the document. And that's how you let yourself be messy. You take a little break, you get some space from it, you go back. Not in a way where you're punishing yourself. That's so dumb, that's so stupid, that's so ridiculous. But maybe with a smile. Oh my God, it was so dumb. Oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. And like, take it out. Just take it out. Just reevaluate it. Be a little stranger to it and see how you can revise it from that perspective as well. So throw up into your typewriter every morning, clean up every noon. Next piece, positive obsession. Without positive obsession, there is nothing at all. It's a hardcore one. This is from Octavia Butler. This is from her book, Parable of the Sowers. This is a dystopia, and it's the first in a series of 2. The next book is called Parable of the Talents. And I do want to say that I do think this is an under-recognized book for the most part, and it is on the order of like 1984 Brave New World in terms of masterful dystopias. It's a really amazing book. Octavia Butler is an African-American woman, and so she hasn't gotten the same recognition in the larger field as these other male authors have, but it's an incredible book. It takes place in the year 2024. She wrote it in, I believe, 1989. It came out in 1989. It's just brilliant. There's a podcast on it now as well. And this is, you know, in many ways, the mindset of the protagonist, Lauren. And this is how she gets through. She becomes a leader, really getting through some very, very, very difficult times. And I chose this because I do want to, again, address, you know, what it takes to get into a top 10, top 20, top 30 school. Because many people do come to Blue Stars thinking, my child has a 4.0, my child plays an instrument, my child plays a sport, he or she is going to Stanford. No, that's just not true. In today's world, you know, the students who are competitive for these really top schools have an inner drive and work out of that inner drive in a way that the perfect student just doesn't. You know, that person does have a positive obsession. You know, maybe it's finding a cure for Alzheimer's or poverty, or you know, coming up with the best meat substitute. But if you want to prepare your child for these great schools, or if you're listening in on this call and you are a teen, there is just a level of aspiration that you need to start to display in early on. And I thought Octavia Butler's way, you know, this is part of a religion that's called the Earth Seed religion. It's very, very beautiful. And I invite you to check out this book if you have a moment. So I wanted to end, you know, the 8th webinar on this note and with this beloved author, wonderful, wonderful author. So Cool, here we are. Here we are. And I think what I have to do, feel like we're ready. Yeah, we're ready to start working on essays. Here she is. Hi, Stacy.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to get started.
Excellent. I am too. Let's get going on some essay work. So, as I think everyone knows by now, we are very systematic. And even though we've gone through the general tips for writing personal insight questions 7 other times, we're going to do it again because this kind of routine, being systematic, is another tip that I want to offer to people. Just always going through these steps and being thorough. It's a very anchoring way to start this creative work. So super quick. Don't forget to be specific. Stay focused on one aspect or one story. Include a takeaway or lesson learned. Don't get fancy. One of my favorite ones. Expect to draft multiple revisions so you can work through initial bad ideas. And now everybody has a visual image for that. Vomit onto your typewriter. Clean up after lunch or noon, whatever he had said, right? Avoid repeating topics or stories. Spread your content throughout the 4 essays. Revise, revise, revise. All right. Question 8. Let us move on to that. Beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? So it's a colorful one. Oh, there's a lot for us to cover. And first we thought we would cover what does it mean to stand out, right? What does this stand out? It feels like a vague phrase.
Yeah, what does it mean to stand out?
I know. And I feel like the thing about this essay question is I feel like it can be really off-putting to teens, because when you're asked that question, your first go-to is, I need to start bragging about myself. It's almost like, in philosophy, we would call this like maybe a speech act. So it's a certain performative move that expects the brag performative move, which isn't the right thing to do. So you sort of feel like you've got a puzzle right at the very beginning, And the other odd piece about this, what does it mean to stand out, is that it compels students to compare themselves to other students. And, that's just not a comfortable space for many young people to be in, especially when they're first starting to fit themselves into the larger world. So yeah, it's a little puzzle here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's also a lot of reluctance because no one wants to look odd, especially teens. So it takes a lot of confidence and you have to own it.
And also, like, in this era of social justice, in this time when there's so much in the media about inequality, and the hard times that people are going through, I feel like it's also really, it feels odd for our teens to just think of themselves as the star of the show. I think it just makes them feel out of sync with the times too.
Exactly. And what does it mean to stand out in the era of TikTok and Instagram, where everybody is a star, So maybe not standing out or maybe not using social media will actually make you stand out.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this when we were taught in advance, but if you do not have a social media account, that might be one way in which you stand out. And that's just an off the cuff thought that I had, just right in the moment, spur of the moment, right here.
Mm-hmm.
But what we had also talked about is that doing good things quietly, that is a valid response to this question, right? That
Absolutely.
brings something unexpected to your reader, right? So
Right.
it could be that, as you're saying, not standing out in that typical way, doing things quietly, that could be a really, really interesting angle. It could also be really unexpected for your reader. And
Mhm.
that's sort of something you want in this essay too. It should feel unexpected. What you put in this essay should feel really unexpected to your reader.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the first part of the prompt. It asks for information beyond what has already been shared in your application. So whatever you write about should feel new and fresh to your reader.
Exactly, exactly. And one of my favorite examples, and this was not an example we have later, um, is from a student who spent her high school years battling lupus and had to be homeschooled for 1 year, went to China another year to find a special cure, and did find ways to cope with it, and then made it to become class president in her senior year. And she wrote this gorgeous essay. We call it the hot pot essay because it starts out with her escaping the hospital in China just to get some hot pot. She was just craving flavor in her food. And it was a real story of resilience and that kind, and it's also something that would not have appeared perhaps in maybe if a teacher talked about it in a letter of recommendation, but that story would not have appeared anywhere else in her application. So
Mhm.
there's a story like that, but it doesn't have to be that heavy. That does happen to be a very, very good example. But maybe you have a positive obsession with finding the best ramen noodle recipe, and you've spent high school, among many other things, with this sort of side gig on just finding that, right, that there's actually an old indie film called Tampopo on the quest for I think they were trying to find the perfect noodle soup, but perhaps you're trying to make the perfect noodle soup. That would be a fine candidate for this question as well.
Yes, and so there you could also have other interests like bird watching every Saturday morning while your friends are still sleeping. It's a very quiet and thoughtful activity that gives you a long-term attention span, which is excellent for college success.
Especially in the age of TikTok.
Exactly.
Right. So unusual hobbies, good space for responding to this prompt. Totally. And that brings to mind for me a student who was a Kathak dancer. It's a form of Indian dance where you have like bells on your feet and your ankles. So it's Khatak, Kathak. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly and not butchering it, which is why I'm spelling it. But this student danced masterfully with these bells, but she also played the harmonium and she sang. And she would do this all at once. It was mesmerizing and
Mm.
breathtaking. She was sort of like the Kathak version of the triple threat. And that's because it was so visual and oral. How would that get into her application but in this essay for prompt 8? So
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that's a really good example.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember that you don't have to feel like you have an unusual hobby to answer this question. So don't worry if you're not a birder or a katak performer. You could be a good listener,
Yes.
or you could be the person in your group of friends who really has their feet planted solidly on the ground. Those things count as well.
Mhm. Most definitely,
Mhm.
having your feet planted on the ground when everyone else around you is going nuts.
Yes.
Um, and that kind of person would be a strong candidate for the UC system, right? Because, you know, these great schools are looking for students who have their feet firmly planted on the ground. So when you're coming up with your possible response to this question, and maybe you're thinking about your unusual hobbies, or maybe you're thinking about your unusual quirks, you do need to make sure that it matches up and makes you into a strong candidate. Not merely a dancing fool or a cooking fool, right? But
Right.
that whatever you choose is going to help you make that connection.
Exactly. It can even be maybe you had a grandfather who taught you how to play chess. And as a result, you became a strategic thinker who plans several steps ahead. Is another good example because universities appreciate students who've already learned to be strategic thinkers. They're great candidates.
Mhm. And even our ramen noodle aficionado, you know,
Mhm.
that person maybe is going to provide warmth and heart during study sessions. You know, this person offers an inviting culture. This person offers emotional intelligence besides the rest of his or her accomplishments. So even you can even make the connection between ramen noodles and being a strong candidate. And if you feel stuck about, oh, well, what does it mean to be a strong candidate? Then I invite you to look back at the Blue Star's 7 C's, the 7 core attributes of admissions distinction. And I haven't included them yet in the resources, but I can after this. So if you're collaborative, if you're curious, etc. I won't go through all of them right now, but if you can find a story that links up to one or some of those characteristics, you've got your essay.
Absolutely. And if your story can display one or some of the characteristics, you have a successful essay.
Definitely.
Mhm.
All right. So let's now move on to what not to do.
Very important.
Mhm. So we already know, like, you shouldn't brag or come across braggy in that essay, and that's clear. And we also know that students, they don't want to. It's a puzzle for them, right?
Absolutely. And it should not be a list of titles, awards, or positions that you've held.
Exactly, exactly. Here's the other thing. This is, you know, a firm tip, another solid gold tip here. Do not write this essay about how hard you work. That will be the last thing that makes you stand out, because every student applying to UC either does work hard or claims they work hard. And in fact, when you claim that you work hard or you claim that you work harder than other people, that does not speak to your character. And at this point, these essays are like the icing on the cake. You know, you have your academic accomplishments, you have your extracurriculars, and
Mhm.
now you're just filling in like the icing, you know, in between, and the layers and the top and the sprinkles. You know, you don't want to throw like bacon on there. You don't want to throw something on top that's not a sweet sprinkle. And what makes your toppings sweet is showing good character. So don't
Yeah,
write, don't write on working hard. That will not help you.
absolutely. Students should think more about how their experiences support or develop their character and the life lessons they've learned. So, this is the why or the so what part of the essay
Yeah.
that clarifies them as a strong candidate.
And as we know, in the age of coronavirus, Black Lives Matter, character is really what counts. You want to bring it back to that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered a bunch of ground here, and it's time to let's just get this all into a neat summary for everyone. And here we have our UC Personal Insight Question 8 specific tips. And here we go. In preparation, think deeply, critically and creatively about what it means to stand out. Check whether the idea you come up with is better for a different essay. In the end, all of the essays, the combination of essays, is what will make you stand out. In many ways, we're thinking about this question all of the time when we're working with our students on every single one of these essays, right?
Absolutely.
So just because they ask you in this question what makes you stand out doesn't mean you have to answer this question. You could put this in a different place, because again, there are these different components. It's beyond what's in your application, the standing out part, the strong candidate. Okay, if this idea is not better for a different essay, then make sure the idea is not mentioned elsewhere in your application, because it does ask for beyond, right? Find a tone that is not braggy. Connect the content of your essay to your character. Connect your character to the idea of strong candidate, so a bunch of steps here. Make sure the essay complements and reinforces the other essays. And do not feel like you have to answer this question to stand out in the admissions pool. So we're going to get into some examples in a second, but I do want to say again, notice number 8. We don't always, this is not there are some, if you look on the web, there are some essay editors, college admissions essay editors who say you have to answer this question. Every candidate should answer this question. At Blue Stars, I got to tell you, we have a totally different attitude toward this question. We don't answer it as much. We have great examples. Like we already gave you some. We have more great examples. But like I said when we started, it puts a certain emotional pressure on students in negotiating this question that isn't always necessary when you could get the stuff in the other questions. So, so go through these steps. Our Kathak dancer could have used that for the creativity essay,
Right.
But it really made her stand out. So anyway, let's get into some examples. So we've got the prompt back up, and I think, Stacy, you are going to tell us about student A.
Yes. So the first example I want to talk about is student A, who cared so much about U.S. immigration policies that she made a commitment to help a friend who was undocumented to apply to college. And she included a discussion of her background and the specific things that she did to help her friends. And what was motivating her is that her parents are also immigrants. But here's what she wrote. Privilege controls society, and it is something I was born with. But privilege is also a tool, and I was intent on using mine to give Jane the opportunity she deserved. So student A used her experience and her privilege to help someone who had less privilege than she did or does.
Yes, so, we work with a lot of privileged students, and I was a privileged student. And most of our middle class kids focus on themselves. That's just what they do. That's what they're encouraged to do. And because she used her privilege to help someone with less privilege, this really does make her stand out. And
absolutely.
And I do have to say, working with the student, I was over the years watching her go through these awakenings to what's going on in the world around her, making these connections. It was a privilege to be able to witness that. It was really beautiful. And the great thing about this essay is that she doesn't just say that she cares about others with less privilege. She shows that she cares about people with less privilege through that specific story.
That's right. And as we know, the famous phrase, show, don't tell, is really important to remember when answering this question.
You know, and I'm really proud that we have actually avoided that cliche, annoying cliche in the webinars until number 8, when it was unavoidable. Not it's I just say it's cliche because students hear it all the time and then it doesn't have meaning to them, so then it's meaningless to use it because then it's just dismissed as a thing that ladies say. um, but this is a really vivid example, and all of the webinars, all of our discussions, we've been taught, when you address the how and when you address the why, you're automatically showing. So basically, these webinars have been almost like, a master class in showing and not telling. But always good to make that explicit and bring the show don't tell in. All right, I want to talk about student B, and I'm smiling. Like if my smile could like get
Yeah.
any wider. And this essay was also his common application essay, and so we gave it a title, and I want to name the title just, and it'll explain the rest of the essay. And the other thing I want to say too, that when we work on multiple schools, usually one of the UC essays is a shortened version of the common application essay. So if you're working on your early admission, you do your common application, you're sorting out the topics in which essays you're going to answer for UC, and you earmark one as the
Mhm.
shortened version of the common. Maybe you need to rearrange it a little bit, but you're going to shorten it. And that's just a solid gold workflow tip for you guys. So this was a common app essay, and it was called Solo Dance Nirvana. And this guy wrote about going to the junior prom alone and having a really good time. And he gave this backstory about how in middle school he was a jerk and all the kids rejected him and made fun of him. And he had to slowly learn how to make friends again in high school. And that experience of being rejected and that experience of having to examine his personality and change it a little, become more socially aware, gave him this confidence to even defy these stereotypes that guys can't go to the prom alone. So I'm going to read a few lines from his essay. He writes, "While it is perfectly normal for girls to go alone, guys who follow suit are judged as losers." And he went, and he had a really good time. And he not only had a good time, this is what he says at the end. He says, "Unlike my friends who spent most of their night awkwardly anchored, I enjoyed myself."
Perfect.
Solo dance nirvana. Solo dance nirvana.
That's a great essay. It's a great story. I want to mention too that students can start their own private initiative to stand out, like Student B, or by aligning themselves with public initiatives such as immigration, like Student A. Both are excellent ways to show unique character. But there's also value in taking a moment to quietly reflect on small moments that have a big impact. And so Student C did just that when she recalled a memory of being 10 years old and going on her first fishing trip. And long after everyone else had given up on trying to catch a fish, she stuck it out until she caught her very first fish. And so for her, it was very exciting and a victory. But what stood out for her most was that she learned patience. And so she also learned how to use that patience throughout her life. And one example of her using it is when she was tutoring small children who were mentally disabled. And a good thing about patience, and it's something that people wouldn't think to write about, but the UC system measures part of their success on graduation rates. So students with patience and the ability to stick it out are worth having around. So So this is a good example as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, a quiet,
Right.
right? A quiet way of standing out. So really want to invite people to think, as with all of the prompts, to think creatively. Don't feel like you have to be pushed in one direction. Um, Smiling again, student D. What he did was he was preparing for a performance called Original Masterpiece. And it was for a debate competition. And the category is for dramatic interpretation. And he has some really funny lines about that whole category. But anyway, he was preparing for a dramatic interpretation performance of a piece called Original Masterpiece. And Original Masterpiece features a protagonist who has cerebral palsy. So, and this student is able-bodied. And so in order to prepare for the role, he had to become the protagonist and contort his body to make his character believable. He had to do it every night, day in, day out, in order to really perfect his performance. And a funny thing happened while he was preparing for this performance. There's a student going to a very competitive school, doing a high school exercise. And all of a sudden, the character that he was preparing for started to enter into him and change him and become his friend. And so it was a very, very interesting thing. This character, Dennis, started to become a part of the student. And so the student wrote, "To me, Dennis was neither a charity case nor a mere forensics exercise, but a close friend. Together we took the world by storm, whether it was shopping, the emerald tie is sharp, he advised, or getting ready for prom. If you don't ask her tomorrow, I will. Through Dennis, I discovered the transformative power of self-deprecating humor. Why cry when you can laugh and make others do so too?" So what happened with the students, he moved out of his personal comfort zone and really became a larger person as a result of going through this exercise. And it really stood out. He did go to Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's an awesome example.
It really is. It really is. So, okay. So we've given you a bunch of examples, and now let's tie this whole thing together so you can see how the examples work with the tips. So student A used her privilege to help less privileged students gain access to higher education. Student B defied social stereotypes by attending junior prom alone and having fun. Student C identified patience as the core value to their success. And student D expanded his own humanity while preparing for his role as a protagonist with cerebral palsy. So you can see these aren't, they're not braggy, you know, like I'm just looking at these as a whole now. They're real.
Yes, they
they're
are
re-
real and personal.
they're real and they're really personal. Okay, well, I'm going to open this up. And, you know, one thing while people are gathering their thoughts and their questions, one thing I made a note to myself to mention, these questions are called personal insight questions, right? So there's this idea of insight. You need to show insight, right? Insight is the product of reflection and self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah, everything we've been talking about has been sort of trying to give students new and fresh ideas for the kinds of ways that they can approach these questions, but also to show that they must involve some sort of reflection, some sort of insight into yourself, insight into the world, insight into relationships, insight into systems, um, insight into subject areas. Let's see. We've got something in Q&A. Should the student work on all 8 in the beginning, then zoom in on 4, or select the 4? Okay. So basically what we suggest students do is look at every single one, make a different, if you're going to do it handwritten, make a different page, make a different doc, and then do a bulleted list of ideas for every single question. That's what I would do. And then print it out, look at it. Where's the heat? That's another, where's the energy?
Exactly.
If you have a lot of bullet points under one, okay, that's probably going to be an essay you're going to want to answer. So then go to the heat. Maybe you pick 1 or 2, these definitely will work. Okay, then start looking at the others and see which will complement the things that I have. That's how I would start to go about that. I don't know, Stacy, if you anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I agree. It's following the heat and getting your ideas out, but also which one is the most meaningful to you? Because you have to convince the admissions officer of whatever you're writing about. So be passionate about it. So follow the heat and follow your passion.
But then make sure that they're all complementary, right? So usually we'll find like 2 that we know, and then you're sort of puzzling, fitting the other 2. And sometimes we come up with the 4 and then we rearrange it a little bit. That's another, you don't don't keep changing things, but also don't get stuck. So you can make your arrangement, and then you start working on them, and something might occur that, oh, maybe this answer might be better for this prompt. That can happen. But you should definitely do a sweep of all of them. I do think making lists is a great way to start writing and see what's there. And honestly, the best advice that I could give anyone about writing is do not leave things stuck in your head. Do not look at the questions and then, I don't know, and then go into the kitchen, Mom, I don't know. And then Mom's like, well, I don't know. And Dad's like, well, you better know. Just start writing lists. Take some action, externalize. Take what's internal and get it out, and then start examining it. So I'm really glad one of my last bits of wisdom is the Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
You just have to search. It's like getting data, to use that analogy. So, any other questions? Do admissions officers coordinate with each other from different campuses? So you're wondering, like, the Yale staff talk to the Harvard staff? Generally, no. No, I have no idea if, like, in an athletic situation with a star player, if Stanford and, UCLA are negotiating at that level of specialization. I don't know the machinations there, but generally, it's very specific to the considerations are specific to the school. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with you. There are organizations where campuses come together to talk about the basic landscape of admissions. So SAT would be an example of where they would talk together about a specific subject, but not specifically about we're going to admit based on this criteria. Nothing like that. But just the general overall landscape of higher ed.
Yeah. So, and for UC similarly, yeah, UCLA engineering is not talking to Berkeley engineering, something like that. Yeah, no, it's specific to the campus. The question is UIUC, so University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign recently announced the EA decision will come out the same day as RD. regular decision? What's the point of doing early admission then, to get the high acceptance rate? Okay, so this is new to me. And so the only thing I can think about right now is that when you apply early to a school, you're signaling that that's, you know, that that's a preferred school of yours, and that, you know, you have deep interest in the school um, and would enroll. Um, I don't know what the point is for the applicant. I'm trying to think that, I'm thinking the point is for UIUC is the yield, is for them to get their yield. So to get those early, you know, not to miss out on the early admission pool. This is a really good question. And again, this is very new to me. And my brain is moving in the direction of, this is in the interest of UIUC and not in the interest of applicants. I don't see how this favors applicants. Like if you are applying to engineering early, does that give you an advantage because you're showing early interest? I don't know, because early decision is really for that performance, that display of interest. So I will look into this and see what's happening and see what other people are saying about it. I'm not yet sure. So thank you for that information. Okay, well, we'll be working on common application essays on August 6th, and everybody will be talking about their favorites. And, you know, these webinars are here to give you energy, to give you ideas, because this work is about, you know, your child's uniqueness or your uniqueness if you're a teen listening in on the webinars. So hopefully we've sparked that interest. The videos are available, so if you want to go back and take some screenshots of some of the bullet points, feel free to do that. So thanks so much for attending. It's been really great to be able to go through all of these essay prompts, and we'll see you soon. Have a great rest of the weekend, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Amy. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye, Stacy.
Bye.
Bye.